Okay, good morning everyone and welcome to Chamber Talk. For those of you who don't know me, this is Sultan Khatoum from Abu Dhabi Chamber of Commerce and Industry, and I have with me today a panel from Gartner to discuss the top 10 strategic technology trends that your organizations need to explore in 2020. Today is our seventh session of the program, but this is not the first time that we host the team, as we have successfully kicked off and launched Chamber Talk's first session with them on post-COVID-19 strategic thinking, pivoting and adapting to the new normal. You can watch that session and all of Chamber Talk previous webinars on our YouTube channel and Facebook page. And for those of you who wish to attend the session in Arabic, please feel free to visit the link we just shared in the chat box. No need to remind you, if you have any questions for our panel, please do engage with us by submitting them in the Q&A box, and we'll try to accommodate as much as possible of it during the last 15 minutes of the session. Very few of us, if none, have ever lived in any of the previous three industrial revolutions. The first revolution from 1760 to 1840 used water and steam power to mechanize production. The second from 1870 to 1914 used electric power to create mass production. And the third, which started in 1950, used electronics and information technology to promote production. Now, and I hope that we are lucky to be standing on the edge of the fourth industrial revolution that is fundamentally altering the way we live, work, and relate to one another. In its scale, scope, and complexity, the transformation will be unlike anything humankind has experienced before. We do not yet know just how it will unfold, but one thing that is clear, and I'm quoting from the World Economic Forum, the response to it must be integrated and comprehensive. The speed of current breakthroughs in artificial intelligence, robotics, the Internet of Things, autonomous vehicles, 3D printing, nanotechnology, biotechnology, energy storage, and quantum computing has no historical precedent. When compared with the previous industrial revolutions, the fourth is evolving at an exponential pace and is disrupting almost every single industry in every country. We saw how digitalization disrupted the operating models of major sectors. Airbnb, for example, became one of the largest players in the hospitality sector without owning hotels. Careem and Uber are among the largest transportation providers without owning cars. We have seen the evolution of predictive analysis in the oil and gas, real estate, and many other sectors, via applying sensors, for example, on rigs to predict its useful lives and accordingly manage major maintenance work without disrupting operations. Sensors on buildings are monitoring footfall and collecting many other data that's affecting the valuation of assets. Digital grids is powering the future of utilities sector. Drones in the logistics sector are reshaping the delivery experience. Watson by IBM, using cognitive learning, is challenging lawyers and doctors in the speed and accuracy of analyzing facts and symptoms, respectively. The list never ends, but what's important is that all these technology innovations bring with it challenges and opportunities, and will definitely have an impact on businesses, people, and governments, as it will reshape our economic, social, cultural, and human environments. Probably COVID has further accelerated the digital transformation, but what we are certain of is that the transformation is happening, and we need to respond quickly in order to maintain competitiveness, sustain, and thrive. Finally, the question remains whether automation will replace humans in the near future and what the jobs of the future are going to look like. However, what's confirmed is that in the future, talent, more than capital, will represent the critical factor of production. I hope this brief intro properly sets the stage for Joe Malik, Executive Partner at Gartner, and our main speaker for the day, to embark on his presentation. Now I will pass it to Stephanie Mitri to quickly introduce Gartner, herself, and the panel before Joe takes the lead. Stephanie?
Thank you, Sultan and Abu Dhabi Chamber team for giving us this great opportunity. Good morning, everyone. My name is Stephanie Mitri. I am handling the public sector in UAE at Gartner. And I have with me today from Gartner's team, Jude Abdeen, the UAE country leader heading the public and private sectors, and Joe Malik, one of the region's executive partners and advisors for C-level executives in the region. Now, before we begin, I would like to quickly introduce Gartner and what we do. So we are the world's leading technology research and advisory firm. We partner with C-level executives and equip them with insights, toolkits, and advice so that they can achieve their mission-critical priorities and strategic objectives, like generating more revenue, optimizing costs, expanding their market share, and so on. So just to put things into perspective, we have globally 80,000 members between end-user companies who consume technology and high-tech companies who produce technology like Microsoft, AWS, Google. And these members interact with our 2,000 plus analysts or subject matter experts and 1,000 plus executive partners on a daily basis. So last year, we had more than 420,000 interactions. And each year, this number increases. So you can imagine the amount of data that we are able to collate. And this data, we use a lot of BI and analytics, and it goes through a 7-layered process to transform it into meaningful information. 4 is internal to Gartner. So we have committees to validate this data, and 3 external to Gartner. Hence, we are unbiased. So we validate this data to make sure of its accuracy. We have also a full-time partnership, external partnership with Harvard University. So before publishing any research or any insight, we make sure it's all based on data points, and it's based on these 420,000 interactions. Then we push this research out, and of course, it is unbiased. So in today's webinar, we will present to you briefly one of our yearly fact-based research that we do, which will cover the technology trends that have the most potential to be disruptive, technology trends reaching critical tipping points or challenging conventional wisdom, how you can leverage these trends to drive innovation and transformation, the impact also of COVID on these trends. So please, if you have any questions, just like Sultan just mentioned, write them down in the Q&A box, and we will be happy to answer it in the end. Also, the presentation will be sent to everyone. Thank you, and Joe, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Stephanie. Can you hear me properly?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So thank you, Stephanie. Thank you, Sultan, for the introduction. As Stephanie has mentioned, on a yearly basis, Gartner publishes the top 10 technology trends. These are the technology trends that are going to impact mostly our business, the operating model, the government. And this year, the technology trends have been split across 2 categories. The first category is people-centric, and the second category is smart spaces. What do we mean by people-centric? Any strategy that we need to have, any trend that we need to implement needs to have a people perspective at heart. That means we have to look at the people, whether it's the citizens, the customers, the employees, and when we implement this trend, it needs to be focused on them. In addition to that, there's the smart spaces. The smart spaces is the physical environment where the people and the different technology-enabled system, devices, solutions interact either with each other or they interact with the environment around them. So when we look at these trends and we look at the people and the smart spaces, there's a set of edge devices, interfaces, application, platforms, infrastructure that enable them to work together. Now, going forward, we've outlined the top trends as the following. On the people side, you have hyperautomation. Hyperautomation is simply you automate what you can automate as much as you can. It involves machine learning, artificial intelligence. On the second layer is the multi-experience. It's basically how you reach your citizens, how you reach your customers. The third trend is democratization, which is basically IT to non-techies or technology to non-techies in a different terminology. The fourth trend is human augmentation, which is augmenting humans through technology in order to do their jobs better, faster, and more efficiently. The fifth one is about transparency and traceability. On the smart spaces front, we have the empowered edge, the distributed cloud, the autonomous things, the practical blockchain, and the AI security. Now, before we go into details in each one of these trends, definitely COVID had an impact on the technology landscape. First of all, as Sultan has mentioned, one of the key areas that we noticed a major change is digital acceleration. There was even a joke on WhatsApp that goes and says, who is responsible for your digital transformation? And the right answer is COVID-19. And this is where we're seeing an acceleration in innovation, an acceleration in proof of concept, an acceleration in adoption of the different technologies going forward. The second thing that we see an impact of COVID is the importance of short-term actions, but really as well long-term strategic thinking. So when you look at any trend, definitely you need to look into it with the current situation, but as well, how would it impact your recovery going forward, and how would it impact your value creation going forward? And that's quite important. The third thing, COVID has resulted in a reprioritization of several of initiatives, in particular, initiatives that would result in the new norm. So at the end of each section, we will have a discussion or a short table that highlights how each trend has changed considering COVID and how much COVID has impacted each one of these trends. So starting with the most known maybe trend or the most heard trend. You've heard about this trend in different terminologies and different technologies, AI, RPA, automation. So basically, just in a nutshell, the goal of hyperautomation is to automate anything that can be automated. The most known use case currently is robot process automation or process automation. Is looking at a certain particular task in the process and seeing how we can automate it. I would give you a very simple example about that. If we have a certain expense report that we need to approve, automating that approval process through a set of rules is part of the hyper automation, and it is the first use case that can be applied. Definitely, this is going to extend much further. Now, what we're seeing is that we're moving from task automation to process automation. And finally, we'll reach a phase which is business operations or digital ops. Now, the difference depends on the level of automation that you do. If you're looking at simple automation, more about automation of tasks, robot process automation, or simple rules, then you're in the event processing automation phase or the task automation phase. When we start moving to more advanced solutions, like now the adoption of chatbots into a lot of the customer service channels, virtual assistants coming. Most of us have, when we contact our banks or our major providers, we notice that there's a lot of focus currently on virtual assistants that can help us to jump through the IVR menu. And finally, the final stage would be about leveraging AI, machine learning, data and analytics further in order to optimize the whole business process and the whole business operation. Now, a couple of things that I would always like to discuss about hyper automation. As was mentioned, a lot of people sometimes look at AI as a replacement for certain positions in the industry, and some of them actually have a fear about AI replacing jobs. Well, the way that we notice that AI has been successful and automation has been successful, if it is actually an enabler rather than a replacement. So, what we're looking and seeking, or successful organizations who've implemented hyper automation and AI, have implemented it to enable their workforce to do their job better. And this is quite important because it makes you focus on the value adding task rather than the repetitive task. Just imagine with me a case that we can all relate to on a personal level. If we had an AI that revises the terms and conditions of an application we just downloaded on our cell phone and highlights any concern or privacy risks that we might be not willing to take, how much time it would save us or how much risk it will mitigate. And this extends beyond other use cases, such as contract reviews, where it can review documents. And really, then we can focus on the value adding task, which is actually using the application, or in the case of the contract review, actually the negotiation process. So the hyper automation is going to accelerate. It's going to keep gaining momentum, and it's going to move more from a task automation to a process automation into a business operation automation. The next trend that we noticed picking up speed is multi-experience. There's a wide range of devices that we are starting to interact with. Initially, we had our maybe web browser, plus our mobile, but now we're seeing a wide range of devices, from VR devices to augmented reality developments, where most of our devices, even at home, would have some sort of intelligence going forward. So with all of this happening, we believe by 2021, at least 1/3 of the enterprises will have deployed a multi-experience development platform to support mobile, web, conversational, and augmented reality and virtual reality platforms. So just to give you a bit of an example about these, I will not go into detail in each one of them, but these are just meant as examples. So immersive environments or immersive experiences will change the way we perceive and interact with the world. It is believed in the future that most of our interactions will not be simply physical or virtual, or real or virtual. They will be a mix of both. And this is, as we see, for example, in the case of retail. If now we wanted to see a certain item in a retail store, the experience right now is we look at the package and we see what it can do and maybe watch a video about it. But imagine that in the future, you can actually point your cell phone or your VR, whatever you have, and when you look at the product, you see it in action. You see it how it works. You see the details about it. A case in point is in the service. If you, instead of looking at a manual or a YouTube video, you can actually look at a more interactive type of video where it bridges the gap between reality and the virtual world. One of the most use cases that has been there for a while and is accelerating as well is in the case of training. In the case of training of pilots, for example, where they're trained through virtual rooms. An additional thing would be design. As you see in the picture on the slide, you would see that through virtual reality and augmented reality, we are able to really go into the design of a room, understand how it works, and see how it will impact, how it will be in real life. The forward-looking concept of this, and maybe a lot of you have heard about it, is digital twinning, which is to have a digital twin of anything which is in the real and physical world that acts and behaves exactly in the virtual world. So just in a nutshell, we see an evolution in the multi-experience going from web back in the early 2000, mobile into 2010, and into 2020, we're seeing more focus on multi-experience, where we're going to see more of an immersive type of experience that is a sensory experience, and it's even a conversational experience with virtual assistants and chatbots. This will all be enabled definitely by new technologies coming into play, such as edge computing, serverless computing, and AI augmented reality. So again, just as a summary on this point, the pathway to ambient multi-experience is multi-sensory and multi-modal. So there will be an array of sensors and radars that will provide all of this information across the different senses. Democratization. Just to put it in very simple terms, this is basically bringing technology to the non-techies. So, for example, at this point, we are hearing more about citizen development. So if we really wanted in the previous world to develop any application, we needed to learn the code, we needed to take courses, go to university. It used to be quite a techy process, and that's why we have developers. Now, in the future, we are noticing more, for example, a shift into more what is known as the citizen technologists or what is be the citizen developer in the case of in the case of development. So by 2022, 30% of organizations using AI for decision making will contend with shadow IT as the biggest risk to effective and ethical decision making. So having this democratization as well creates a certain risk because now technology is accessible to the masses, and because technology is becoming more citizen oriented and is becoming more to non-techies as well, there is a risk that this will create fragmentation within an organization or an entity, and it can create suboptimal use of certain technologies as well. So, what is democratization? It's about empowering everybody. So, making the technology accessible. We've talked about citizen process automation, we've talked about process automation. I've given the example about development. There's also the example about data science, which is basically manipulating or understanding and analyzing the massive amounts of data that we have and creating insights and decisions out of it, and making that technology accessible to the citizens and to the business users is going to really facilitate and change the way we address technology. Okay, so in a simple term, democratization is really around everyone. It's about how it's going to affect you, everyone else in the organization, and the people at large. And as we see, this is only enabled because of the different technologies, such as AIs and machine learning, that will provide the assistance that you need and the simplification that you need going forward. Human augmentation. In the past years, we've noticed there's a shift in the devices that we use to do our jobs. Initially, we had the desktop, right? Everybody had a desktop. When you start your job, you go, you get your desktop, you sit on your desk, and you start doing your job. As we progressed, we noticed that the mobile has become a critical part of our work. All companies, entities are providing mobile devices to their employees. However, going forward, this augmentation to do our job is going to be beyond that. It's going to be physical augmentation, cognitive augmentation, as well as virtual augmentation. As you see in this slide, a worker is assembling a vehicle with the help of an exoskeleton. So in the future, we might expect that some of the companies are going to evolve from the policy of bring your own device to the policy of bring your own extension or bring your own experience. And these things, we're noticing them because now we are expecting that there would be an array of different solutions and systems that will augment your employees in order to really do their job more efficient, better, and in order to really focus on the value add part of the work. So by 2025, 40% of enterprises will shift from designing for humans to architecting humans themselves by adopting human augmentation technologies and methodologies. I'll give you one example in particular, which is close at heart, is human augmentation for people with determination. In the past years, it was slightly harder for people with determination to compete at the same level as others. Now, with technology provides them with the necessary tools to have the same skill set as anybody else. Recently, there was a Down project that was mentioned by one of our analysts, whereby people with determinations were used, and people who couldn't even use any of their motor skills except their eyes, they used their eyes to control robots in a restaurant. So these things are becoming more of a reality. One of the major vendors was testing a specific glass which leverages artificial intelligence to enable the user who was blind to see his surrounding and to assess his surrounding. So these things are becoming a reality, and we're noticing more and more physical augmentation, cognitive augmentation, and virtual augmentation in our life. when we have all the virtual assistants that help us in doing our job, when we use the different applications that helps us to move around. These things are really augmenting us, but there will be a next level in the coming years. But you might want to come and say and ask us, but with everything happening with IoT, with all of these devices, what about my data? What happens to my data? And that's why an important trend going forward is transparency and traceability. There's a new terminology for AI right now. It's called models. It's called traceable or explainable AI. To be able to really explain the logic behind it and how the data is being used. So by 2023, over 75% of large organizations will hire artificial intelligence specialists in behavior forensics, privacy, and customer trust to reduce brand and reputation risk. As Gartner, we believe there's 6 pillars for trust. The pillars are integrity, ethics, openness, accountability, competence, and consistency. If any government organization and private entity has these pillars, it will have a higher level of trust by its citizens as well as its customers. And these involve a set of stage gates or touch points, such as ensuring there's proper validation and testing, such as ensuring there's proper testing and validation of the data and the single source of truth, ensuring awareness, having audits and assurance governance across. And more importantly, being able to explain if something goes wrong. So these 6 pillars are critical for any organization in order to gain the trust of its citizens and its customers. COVID has really impacted these trends. But what we're noticing is COVID has impacted the adoption of these trends in a positive way. We are noticing further acceleration in the digital transformation and the digitization in general and the adoption of innovation and innovative trends. So just to start with hyperautomation, since a lot of us cannot go now to offices, and in certain cases, some of the staffs did not have the proper access to the tools or to the solutions in order to complete their jobs. As simple as a signature for a contract would stop a contract. So a lot of the government entities and the private sector entities are looking to automate as much as possible of these processes in case their staff cannot go to work, in case they are sick, in case they have any emergencies. Automation will enable the work and the business process to continue and to address these challenges. Multi-experience, definitely new customer channels are coming into play. Hand-free experiences in COVID are very important. Multi-devices for remote workers is also very important in order to be able to do their job. We're noticing a shift in the training towards augmented reality or virtual reality in order to build skills much faster. And this is going to be mainstream maybe going forward, specifically as we get new people into the workforce. Democratization, because a lot of entities are feeling some of their experts are not able to reach their work, or they might face certain health challenges, and these experts do not have redundancies in the organization. Looking into empowering staff to perform their tasks through deploying the right solutions would help to cover that gap. So do more with fewer people. Human augmentation is coming into play. What we're seeing is COVID is mainly health monitoring and tracking through wearable, which is a sign of human augmentation, and it will help to track in case somebody contracts COVID. Remote operation of semi-autonomous things for a wider audience. Maybe a lot of you have seen it on the news, the use of drones to deliver medical supplies to areas where we cannot reach. Or, for example, looking into currently in the healthcare sector, if we can use robots to deliver medicine. And there's a lot of these use cases that are being implemented right now. Finally, transparency and traceability, new policies and new regulations that will govern the data going forward. Now, as we move to the smart spaces, these are the technologies that enable the people, as I mentioned, to interact with the solutions together. The first one is empowered edge. So in simple terminologies, edge is about enabling computing at the edge. And it's gaining a lot of traction because now we're having a lot of devices at the edge. Before we used to have our laptop and the desktop. Now we're looking into having our car. We're looking into having our different devices at home, our iPad, even our refrigerator and our switches. All of these are edge devices. So by 2023, more than 50% of enterprise-generated data will be created and processed outside the data center of the cloud, up from less than 10% in 2019. Now, an important point to note is the edge is not going to replace the cloud. It's going to strengthen the cloud. Edge has specific scenarios or use cases where it's quite efficient to implement. For example, I'll give you the car. If you're driving a car and let's say there's no mobile coverage and it is an autonomous driving car, what will happen to you? Most probably the car will crash because it cannot communicate back to the cloud, and there's a major security challenge here. So in these scenarios, there needs to be a significant amount of computation happening at the car, which is the edge, in order to enable it to operate flawlessly in case it is not connected to the cloud. Edge is very important in cases where you have challenges when it comes to data or privacy concerns. Edge is also quite important in the case of latency. Since these computations are done at the edge, you don't have any latency challenges. And you don't have any disruption challenges due to connectivity as well. So in cases where the data is too big to send to the cloud, or there's risks in sending the data, or it might be even too small to send it to the cloud, and there's real risks of latency, this is where edge would play a very important role. And going forward, we'll see edge move from the model that we have right now, which is endpoint talking to a near edge, then a far edge, then to a cloud, which is static, into more of an adaptive mesh type architecture, where we will notice it will be not just the endpoint going through the near edge to the enterprise, but it will be the endpoint talking to another endpoint next to it, to your car, talking to the car next to it, or your mobile device talking to the mobile device next to it. So it will be more of a dynamic network architecture and topology, and more of a distributed cloud model. So this is a great segue for the next trend, which is distributed cloud. Previously, for a lot of people, when we mentioned the word distributed cloud, it was not intuitive because cloud was supposed to be a centralized computing hub, which is location independent. A distributed cloud is location dependent, and this is its advantage. And we're noticing more of this distributed cloud architecture coming into play. And this is driven by a lot of factors. Some of these factors are actually the data residency challenges that you have. You would need your cloud to be available within the geographical boundaries of your country in order not to face such challenges. So by 2024, the majority of cloud service platforms will provide services that execute at the point of need. Another thing to mention about this, which is quite important, is it helps a lot latency, especially, for example, as a case in the case of gaming, whereby if you have any kids and they're gaming in the weekend, you'll notice a lot of their games might not actually connect properly to the mother cloud. So a lot of the vendors are extending their cloud and are hosting instances with local presence at telcos or at local cloud providers in order to be able to address these challenges and in order to be able to accelerate the delivery of the services and not to face any latency challenges. So as we mentioned, the hybrid cloud sets the stage for the distributed cloud. So private cloud service architecture does not reflect the centralized cloud model, right? Because you are not benefiting from the centralized economies of scale of the cloud. The enterprise owns and is responsible for design, development, deployment, governance, operation, evolution, and update of the cloud. But really, this contradicts with the cloud model where you really are taking all of these responsibilities and giving them to a cloud provider. So public cloud service architecture is replicated on-premise or is complementary to the centralized service. So that's how we start to notice the distributed cloud fixing this problem. The provider is now responsible and owns the architecture, the development, the deployment, the governance, the operation, evolution, and the update. So what happened with the distributed cloud is now this is simply a smaller cloud, an extension of the provider cloud, and he still owns it, he still operates it. So suddenly all the headache of your own on-premise infrastructure or your own private cloud is moved to him. And this is further complemented with Edge. So consuming enterprise may retain ownership, governance, operation, and update of some physical component, especially as you move forward with Edge. So the things that you feel uncomfortable moving them to the provider, you can still maintain them through having Edge devices. It can be far edge devices or near edge devices. So Edge combined with distributed cloud is quite powerful going forward. Autonomous things. This is becoming more of a reality. The nicest one that we always dream about is cars. If we're driving between, let's say, Dubai and Abu Dhabi for a business meeting, and we typically spend an hour commuting. Imagine that we have a vehicle that drives by itself, and we're actually using that time to prepare for the meeting. Not just prepare for the meeting, do the work, add value, focus really on the task at hand rather than the driving. It would be safer and it would be much more efficient. So by 2025, more than 12% of newly produced vehicles will have level 3 or higher autonomous driving hardware capability. Just to explain what is level 3, level 3 is typically assisted driving capabilities that we have today. It is basically AI or the different automated processes in the vehicle assisting the driver. Level 4 of autonomous vehicle is a car that will actually drive itself in certain conditions. Like when we go to a highway, we'll give it to the car and it will drive itself. Level 5 is where you have a vehicle that all the time will be navigating by itself and driving by itself. Definitely, we're still far away maybe for level 5 because there's a lot of question marks that we would like to address. We always, one of the questions that we typically have is, if an accident happened, who could we blame? Should we blame the AI or should we blame the human? In addition to that is a lot of people might not be very comfortable with that, in particular when it comes to giving the decision for the car. So currently we own the decision. It is our decision how we drive. Imagine if you are coming on a stop sign and somebody is coming and crossing the street. And as they cross the street, they've passed they passed a red light. They shouldn't be crossing. And you have two solutions. You can either hit the person or you can move aside and hit potentially the sidewalk or the wall and maybe injuring yourself severely. What would you do? It's not, the question is, the AI has taken that decision from you if it was driving, because it will decide if it will hit that person or not. Whereas now you own the decision. And then goes the fact that, legally, what's the constraint on it? On top of that, this brings a lot of security questions into play. However, we are noticing a real big push in this field. Robots are becoming more autonomous. drones, and especially if you read about Amazon and a lot of the retailers who are trying to augment their delivery and last miles, they're actually focusing on drones. And drones are quite safe in order to deliver into remote areas or areas that are too risky to send humans to. Vehicles, ships, and aircrafts are coming into play. Already, a lot of the landings that are done in airlines through the computer, and these are gonna keep getting more and more advanced. Ships is another example. Appliances are getting more intelligent. And they are interacting more and they're becoming more and more autonomous. You might wake up one day in the morning, your coffee machine will bring your schedule from your phone, and then will start the coffee right in the right time for you to take it and go directly to your car, which is already working, and it's cooled down so that you can drive directly and to go to the place you work. And most probably the car will drive you, you will not drive it itself. So this is happening. There's a lot of use cases in the field of agriculture, military, minerals, inspection, security that are coming into play, and really these are limitless. And when we talk about when we talk about these autonomous things, there's a couple of things that you need to be really aware of. One is the environment that they're interacting, the level of control that we're giving them as well. Are they fully autonomous, or are they highly autonomous with human intervention, or ideally human assisted? Also, in addition to the environment and the level of control that we're giving them, one of the area is how they will interact with each other. Will they collaborate? Are they going into a swarm type of collaboration? So these are the things that going forward you will notice more focus on. And regulation and social acceptance of these technologies will play a key role. Practical blockchain, I'll accelerate a bit here because I still have two trends and we're running a bit out of time. Blockchain is coming back to the picture with COVID. In 2023, blockchain-inspired technology will support the global movement and tracking of 2 trillion of goods and services annually. So what is blockchain? Blockchain is basically a distributed ledger. It is imputable. It is shared and distributed, which makes it imputable. It is encrypted. It has distributed consensus and tokenization. Now, permission blockchain is a different form of blockchain, which is more for commercial use. And this permission blockchain does not use tokens as incentives for validator, because tokenization and public distribution, it needs a lot of computing power to be done. So in that case, permission blockchain is a different version that is more commercial going forward, and you'll hear more about it going forward. And blockchain, we are hearing blockchain coming back into play with new use cases to track COVID or to track health. So going forward, you will notice a resurgence of blockchain with new use cases into play and with a different set of deployments coming into play and models that come into play. So after blockchain, the final trend that we'd like to talk about is AI security. By 2022, 30% of all cyber attacks will leverage training, data poisoning, AI model theft going forward. Now, one point to mention is you are going to expect in the future, though this looks like a sci-fi movie, AI attacking AI. So your actual cybersecurity is built through AI, and it is being attacked by AI. Security challenges are increasing. Every single IoT device that you connect to your network is a security threat. When we talk about remote work, for example, everybody is asking, what about remote work? How does it impact security? Well, it impacts security a lot, because now I'm talking to you over my home Wi-Fi, and my home Wi-Fi is a potential security threat, right? Whereas before, I used to talk through your Wi-Fi or through my company Wi-Fi, which has all the set of security standards that are implemented. So the points of attack are increasing and expanding dramatically with IoT. The rate and type of attacks is expanding as well. We noticed on a high level, and this is non-official figures, but we're noticing almost 3.5x the number of attacks. This is 350% increase in cyber attacks. I've heard even clients in the region telling me that we've noticed a 9x increase in attacks. That means 900%. You notice banks, for example, are increasing the amount of emails to build awareness about phishing. In the future, we're going to notice more sophisticated attacks and more complex patterns of attacks. So if you assume that your ML has good quality data, because data is always a challenge, and it's been running for a while, so it built its learning curve, it's not in the early learning curve stage, then ML would be much more efficient than you in detecting anomalies and in detecting any cybersecurity threat coming your way. But these are big assumptions, by the way, especially in our current situation where data is not at its best. And these things are going to change. So don't expect going forward that you'll have machine learning and the hacker is still doing all the processes manually. No, he will have machine learning techniques as well. He will have techniques just like you, and he will not even just attack your current databases or your information or your website. He will attack your ML techniques and he will attack your ML models, and the hacker himself will be, and sometimes maybe your ML models will will attack you at the end if they're compromised. So in a nutshell, AI is critical going forward. Adapt in your security, build a proper adaptive security model. So how did this change with COVID? Well, this has changed a lot with COVID, especially on the empowered edge. There's a lot of more distribution for computing. A lot of the computing is now being shifted back to the laptops or to the end devices in order to not strain the telco networks, as well as to address any latency challenges that you might face. There will be more sophisticated remote home office environments going forward. Distributed cloud will pick up quicker. It allows scalable, flexible resourcing in uncertain times, and it improves resiliency and addresses latency. Autonomous things are also accelerating. We're noticing a lot of the, especially in retail, where we're seeing more in the warehouses, the use of robots. We are looking more into zero-touch type of approaches, use robots for and drones for sterilization of environments. And this is something we've seen in the UAE being done. Rapidly scaling warehouses can be done through robots. Practical blockchain is coming again into play, especially on the supply chain side. When it comes to medication and critical supplies, it will reduce the need for manual handling, processing, and entry of data, and it will provide a better source of truth. And AI security to address the new attacks that are coming. The more devices that you have connected, the more IoT endpoints that you have, these are all areas which needs to be secured. And as you work more from home, working from home increases risk, hence the need for stronger security. So that's in summary the top trends. Now I would like to give the floor back to Sultan, because I know there's some questions that I've noticed that we can address at this point. Thank you a lot for listening for this session, and I'm looking forward for your questions. Sultan?
Thank you, Joe. Thanks for the interesting insight provided. This is always an interesting topic for me at the personal level, at least. And I believe many of our participants are joining for that reason. So we have received a couple of questions. I'm going to start with the question about the hype of AI and hyperautomation. Will these replace jobs? I know you covered a bit on it, but if you can elaborate.
Yes. So look, there's two things that you've mentioned: hype and you mentioned replacing jobs. If you look at the Gartner, we have something called we track the maturity of the different technologies. So we have a hype cycle. AI is still in its early phases when it comes to the hype. It's still in experimentation, and few technologies have reached really productivity and mainstream. So it's still new. So so it's being adopted and it's accelerating in terms of adoption. It is expected that there would be a certain dip of, there would be a certain impact on the jobs initially. However, as we've seen in the I would say, previous industrial revolution that happened, initially everybody was afraid what this would impact. Actually, it ended up creating more jobs than it took over, right? And this is what we expect as well with AI. It will provide a lot of new jobs. The jobs of the futures are not known at this point. But as we see, there's a lot of new jobs coming, from AI expert to data models to etc. I can mention thousands of new jobs coming. It will involve certain maybe repetitive jobs initially, where you would need to reskill your workforce. But in the longer term, it is expected to provide further opportunities. And its success now depends on how you implement it. And I really focus on the fact that it is being implemented right now to augment the workforce rather than to replace, because this will drive adoption and it will reduce any challenges when it comes to culture.
Thanks, Joe. I mean, that that would jump me to another question that's related to this, and I believe you just touched the point that it's the way how we implement this. So there is a responsibility for on everyone, like the private and the public sector, I would say, and that comes to the question, like some high risk jobs in the market include cashiers, toll booth operators, drivers, and fast food jobs, and many others. There is a risk that those would be replaced by AI, and so employees
Yeah.
should be trained on those new techniques. And then let's say, for example, an example is the drones. So instead of being delivery guys, they can be drone operators. So what's the
Exactly.
specific role of the private sector, I would say, and the government in terms
Yeah.
of elevating this? I mean, the whole session that we're having today is to spread awareness for the private sector to elevate their competitiveness in this in the digital end, so they can probably plan for investment. So, but I mean, you can put it your own way.
Yeah, so there's different roles, to be honest. I think you mentioned something very important, Sultan, is one of the key areas that you need to look into when you come to these trends is the culture. So first of all, when it comes to the private and the public sector, is to ensure that they have the right culture and employee upskilling programs going forward, in order to make sure that the new workforce is ready for the new positions. This goes across the education sector. This goes across all. The role of the government in specifically comes on the regulatory side. There's a lot of these technologies that are not being adopted to their fullest because of certain regulatory constraints that are placed. And evolving the regulations, as a sample point, would be the autonomous car, in order to address these new technologies. Very simple example, as we mentioned, if the autonomous car has a crash, how do you deal with it? This is the type of regulations that you need to have to place. What to do with the data that's coming out? This is another regulation. So there's a big government focus on that. Also, a big government focus is to ensure that the training institutions and the educational institution are preparing the workforce for these technologies. And there's one thing that we sometimes forget about is our kids, they will live with these technologies. It's now normal that when we had a cell phone, my age, maybe we're almost at the age of 20, right? It's a long time back. Now, almost my daughter, who's 2 years old, she knows how to open the iPad. She knows how to select the application that she wants to play. So they're born with these technologies. So they will adopt it and they will move into accepting it in a different way than we did. So I hope this covered a lot. I know I've covered a lot of aspects in this answer, but I hope it touched based on your question.
It did. Thanks, Joe. You've mentioned the crash of autonomous vehicles and proper governance should be in place. So, what is actually the risk of crash of those autonomous things? And what if we lose connectivity?
Yes, there's definitely a risk, and that's why when we talked about these trends, we talked about a combination of trends to enable this new ecosystem or this new norm. If you lose connectivity, it's a huge thing. How vendors or platform providers are going to address this is through leveraging empowered edge. A car is a very simple example because you can add a huge computer in the car and it will be just an additional 4 or 5 kilos to the car, which is nothing. So leveraging different technologies and this very solid backbone, technologies such as 5G, empowered edge, distributed cloud, and putting the right stage gates in order to make sure that these risks are mitigated would be critical for their success, because there's a risk of losing there's a risk of latency, there's a risk of losing connectivity, and this needs to be addressed through the new technologies that are emerging.
Thanks for this. A question on how would cybersecurity, you've covered part of your session, covered edge and the importance of it. So how would cybersecurity constraints affect the deployment of edge to enterprise hybrid architecture?
So just to understand that more, how does the cybersecurity constraints impact the adoption of distributed cloud and edge and all of these things, right?
Yeah, so the constraints on cybersecurity, how it affects the deployment of edge on the hybrid architecture of companies.
Definitely. It is. I'm not a security expert, so again, we try to cover the trends from a strategic perspective, and we have our own experts that can give you more technical answers than this. But on a high level, one of the key trends that we discussed is AI security. Cybersecurity, as we increase any endpoint, is becoming more critical. That's why you notice a lot of endpoint management solutions are being deployed at this point on our laptops, on our mobile, and this will extend to all of these devices. So definitely there will be more cybersecurity risks coming out of this. But the way you can address these is through having an adaptive security model, leveraging AI and machine learning, and also having endpoint protection security to ensure that all your devices are properly managed. And it's up to you to also have the proper awareness about that. Awareness is critical, not if you got an email or if you've noticed some fishy things happening, to report it and to be diligent about
it. Thanks, Joe. I'm going to take like 3 or 4 questions max because I'm afraid we're almost done. So how successful do you think are blockchain implementations? Like we've seen recently, like the rise of cryptocurrencies, and how successful do you think was blockchain?
Well, I'll leave it to the audience who have invested in cryptocurrency to answer this. Look, recently, blockchain, at least, again, I'm not the expert, but has not been as successful as initially hyped. It passed through a major hype cycle, and I wish I had the hype cycle with me, but it had a lot of more expectations. And in the past 1 year or 2 years, there has been a scale down of blockchain projects, and it lost a lot of its I would say, how to put it in nice words, hype. Let's keep it at the word hype. So it lost a lot of its traction. This is because of, first, as I mentioned before, it needed a lot of computational power. A commercial model was not yet enacted. Going forward, we're noticing that the deployment model is changing, and we're noticing that there is a need for blockchain in order to accelerate this decision making and this validation process. With that, we will expect that blockchain is going to be again coming into play, and we're going to notice a higher success rate than before. Before it was really, and one thing to notice about blockchain when you look about success rate, it requires an ecosystem. So it's one of these technologies that you as an entity alone cannot deploy if you don't have the right ecosystem supporting you. And this has also impacted some of the success rate in blockchain. But the expectation is this success rate to be higher in the coming years, and the expectation is that technology will pick up again.
Okay. Last two questions. One is from a concerned father, I would say. And the answer would be like probably very straightforward for you, or you'll add your personal perspective. So, do you think AI now is better than medicine and engineering for kids studies?
Yes, if you're definitely, if you are now in entering your university, it is maybe because the medical field, every single field is going to need an AI expert. If you look in the region right now, there's a massive shortage in AI expertise and data science expertise. So if you're looking into that field, it might be a safer bet. I would say definitely. This is my personal opinion. But it would be a safer bet. So if I had kids right now in school, I would push them towards. I would nudge them. This is the new terminology towards this type of degrees.
Thanks, Joe. So the last question for today's session, and I'm very glad to have you. Like we had a very, very good and interesting session. We've got a lot of feedback on it, and I'm certain we're going to have the same now. So last question before you close.
Sure.
Digital transformation requires significant investment, which in most cases can be justified with a proper analysis in terms of savings to the organization. Now, not many companies find this exercise easy.
Yeah.
So this becomes secondary. So what do you think can be done, and what businesses should seek in making this task easier, and how they can show them the realization of their return on investment?
Sure. So if you want a quick win to do that, is really focus on the things that have a business outcome. So start small. You don't need to go full scale. Start with a POC. Start with something that has a very clear business outcome that you can take to your senior management, to your CEO, to your minister, and tell them, look, we've done this, and look how much benefit we've come out of it. Once you get these use cases that cost the least, and they have very clear and visible business outcomes, you will get traction. Another thing we notice running, and this is something we typically as Gartner run with our clients, is you need to have a proper value management program in place. Value management, some people call it cost optimization, but it is important that you look at your projects and you ensure that your projects have a proper business outcome, and you channel the budget of the projects that don't have a proper ROI and don't have a proper business outcome to your digital transformation. It's a long process. I would say it's a 2 to 3 year process to do that. It's not an easy thing, but this is some of the things that we typically, as Gartner, do with our clients to help them free out and reshuffle budget to enable that. So maybe these are some, I would say, one quick win and one longer term strategic initiative to look at.
Thank you, Joe. If you have any final comments before I close, please feel free.
So thank you everybody for attending this session. Thank you, Chamber, for inviting us again. I hope this session has been quite useful for you. Definitely, there's a lot of other research on this material and a lot of other experts that provide the details. We try to provide a high-level overview as much as possible on these trends. So that's it from my side. Jude, Stephanie, anything else to add before we give it to Sultan?
Sure. Thank you everyone for attending, and I'm really sorry if we weren't able to answer some of your questions. Please connect with us and we will make sure that we will be able to answer them, because we're short on time and we're already about 6 minutes more. So thank you very much. And the session is recorded. You can see it later, and the presentation will be sent to you as well.
Jude, is Jude still here? Yeah.
I'm having technical issues with my camera, but I hope you guys can hear me.
We do.
Yes, we can hear you.
Great. I just want to take this opportunity to thank everyone who joined this session. Great questions thrown all around. We can spend hours, having this discussion. It's a topic that I personally also enjoy. I'd like to take this opportunity to thank the Chamber, His Excellence Mr. Al-Neheri Sultan, for this great opportunity. We look forward to delivering value to all the members of the Chamber across the Emirate of Abu Dhabi and across the UAE. And we hope we exit this global pandemic with a lot of learnings and a lot of opportunities to move forward and grow as public sector entities who have joined. I saw many, and also private. Thank you so much for this opportunity. I wish you all a great week and a great day ahead.
Thank you, Jude. I want to thank you again, Joe, Jude, and Stephanie, and thanks to all our audience for the day. Glad to have you all here, and we're looking as well to have you on Tuesday. We're going to host KPMG and to discuss COVID-19 and changing customer behavior. What can the UAE's consumer and retail businesses do to prepare their organizations for the future? Until then, stay safe and have a good day.